So we talk a lot about the biblical calendar, and we talk about the feast, we talk about all the aspects of the law, we talk about all of these things. But what was the use and the purpose of the calendar? There was a use and there was a purpose for the calendar.
Wasn't it just to get the people into Jerusalem on time for the offerings? And was that the focus of it?
That was part of the focus. Yeah, that was part of it. But there was a more basic reason that I don't think any of us have ever explored, maybe, that the calendar was given to the people of Elohim.
Becca, just this morning, Abba sent me to Exodus 13, sort of 6 through 10. And shall I read it?
Sure.
Okay. And I really didn't see this before. Maybe I sort of understood it, but not to the depth that I got it this morning. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast of the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among your living quarters. And you shall tell your son in that day, saying, this is done because of what the Lord did for me. When I came up from Egypt, it shall be as a sign to you on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. Then also in Deuteronomy 6:8, you shall bind them. And then I saw the actual binding of the barley and the wheat when I immediately, it was like a visual. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be the likeness in front of your eyes. And he's talking about the laws, about understanding it, about keeping it. And that gathering was just, it was like a visual that I had as soon as I read them. And I thought, okay, what did they talk about? Even not to go into something so different, but what did they say was the sign of the beast? And it was on the hand and it was on the forehead. So if we have binded the laws in our heart and it's on our it's in our head, it's on our hand. I mean, that visual of gathering the barley and the wheat. Well, if you're celebrating at a time that there's no barley, or you're celebrating a time there's no wheat, that gathering wouldn't be taking place. So I saw the importance then, the immediate importance of the timing and how we can't have it without that. I knew about empty-handed, but this was deeper.
So the timing is very important, but why? Okay, so we know that the timing is important because we have an appointment 3 times a year in Jerusalem, Shlosh Regalim, the 3 times we walk up to Jerusalem. Okay, so that was very important, the timing. But what were we taking with us? And the very basic understanding of what the barley, wheat, and the 7th month offerings were. What were they to the people? They were food. Plain and simple, they were food. So we've looked at the calendar, we've looked at it prophetically. We've stood in the forest of the Torah trees, looked at these words, like we've looked at the Abib trees for months and years and tried to determine what that Abib is. And we've looked over here at first fruit and we've looked at that tree. And so we've looked at all of these things in the forest of the Torah. But when we sat back from the forest of the Torah, the calendar was food. Okay. So Exodus, okay, I'm not going to feed you. I'm going to let you guys tell me. In Exodus, there is a verse that talks about the 3 things that a woman is to be provided in marriage. Okay? April's got it. I can see by the smile on her face. Can you read that for me?
Exodus 21.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that Julie? Go ahead. That's fine. Someone else can read it.
Go ahead, Julie. Tell me, what are the three things that that she was to be provided?
Well, I don't have it in front of me, but I can get there in a minute. It's food and raiment and duty of marriage.
Duty of marriage, which is offspring. That's right. And when we look at what Elohim did for the woman, he calls her a woman that he brought out of Egypt. What did he do? He clothed her. He took the clothing of Egypt and he put on the, and then he brought her out with food. He brought her out with barley cakes. In fact, when we read about the time in Exodus, it's full of, he says, I fed you. He said, your clothing didn't wear out. Your shoes didn't wear out. And he reminds her over and over and over again of this miraculous provision that he gave her coming out of Egypt. So there's another law that I want to bring to memory, and I'm sorry, I hope you don't hear the dinging on my computer. I don't know what to do about it. And it's Exodus, I'm sorry, it's the law of when a man goes to war and he sees a woman that he desires and he wants to marry her. Does anybody have that verse? It's in Deuteronomy.
I don't have it, but you're talking about where he has to shave her head and clip her fingernails and let her like be for 20 days or something.
Yeah, I'd like somebody to read that one though. It's Deuteronomy 21:11. Well, it starts, 11 is like the, let me get my e-sword up too. Hang on.
So I have Deuteronomy 21:11. Do you want me to read it?
Well, let me see where I want you to begin. It was just a loose.
It might start in like 10.
21:10. At through through 14, I guess. Yes, the whole thing.
Okay. When you go forth to war against your enemies, and Yahuwah Elohika has delivered them into your hands, and you have taken them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and have desire unto her, that you would have her to be your woman, then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and pare her nails, and she shall put the raiment of her captivity from off her, and shall remain in your house and bewail her father and her mother a full month. And after that, you shall go in unto her and be her man, and she shall be your woman. And it shall be, if you have no delight in her, then you shall let her go whither she will, but you shall not sell her at all for money. You shall not make merchandise of her, because you have humiliated her, or you have humbled her.
So basically, this is absolutely a picture of what happened to the woman that he brought out of Egypt. He went down to war and he warred against the Pharaoh. He brought in plagues and eventually he killed the firstborn before he let the woman go. And then when he brought her out, it was at exactly 30 days that she ate the unleavened cakes. And during that time, doesn't the scripture says that they talked against Moses and they talked against God, and they were complaining and they were saying, oh, it's better to be back in Egypt, so where we had leeks and fish. And so they were in this mourning process for 30 days. So everything that we see about the Deuteronomy 21, when a man goes to war and desires a woman, we see that the nation of Israel went through this as well. Exodus 15:3 tells us that our God is a man of war. Right here in the middle of this Exodus, he's telling us that he was a man of war and he went down to Egypt and he took this bride. So what I'm saying to you is that while she was in the wilderness, he fed her manna, her clothes didn't wear out. And the Bible even talks about the offspring that they had together. Now we cross in Joshua chapters to about the 4th, I think, chapter is the story of when they crossed the Jordan River and they came into the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, to possess it. And at that point, he changed the manna for the goodness of the land. There was a verse. I didn't write it down. Someone can use their eSword or whatever you've got to see if you can find it, that talks about their longing for the grains, and they mentioned the figs, I believe, and the pomegranates that they had in Egypt. What I'm wanting to show you is that everything that they had in Egypt is mentioned in Deuteronomy 8:8. So let me see if I can pull that up real quick. I might be able to do that quicker. I believe if I just look for figs, I'm going to find it.
Becca, is that the Numbers 11:5 verse? I don't know if it's what you're talking about.
It's Numbers 20, verse 5. Wherefore have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us into this evil place? It is no place of seed or figs or vines or of pomegranate, neither is there any water to drink. So Egypt, if we fill in the blanks of what's written there, and when you fill them in, the empty spaces, the gaps, it represents the 7 species. And that's what he tells us in Deuteronomy 16, that he was, or Deuteronomy, I don't think it's Deuteronomy 16. We all know the verse about, I'm bringing you to a land of hills and streams that drinks the waters from heaven. It's a good land. And it goes on and on and on. And then Deuteronomy 8:8, he lists the 7 species. So the 7 species, the 7 first fruits offering, is covenant provision for the people of Elohim as their husband. It's really important because then we can start parting the waters, and the people that believe, and I fought this battle a lot this week with 2 different individuals, very belligerent individuals, unfortunately. Well, you can tell it's barley and the little sticks are green, so we have to have the first of the month now. Because they don't know the promise is from the husband to the wife, that I'm going to provide food for you. And if I've done this, then you're going to give me the best of your food first, and the rest of it's going to be blessed. So unless we understand that this calendar is our covenant provision from our Father, he's our creator, he's our husband, he's our father, he's our all in all. That's why we're giving him, what is it, Romans says, if the first fruits is holy, the rest, the lump is holy. We give him that because as our husband and as our provider, he's kept that covenant promise of feeding us. So, which brings me to, I've got some chats here. Let me just check the chat. Hang on, sorry. Okay, that's okay. Which brings me to what I wanted to speak to you about tonight. On the day I saw the new moon, barley began to exit the boot. So one of the things I want to change this year, and I'm working very hard to do, is to get rid of all these buzzwords. The buzzwords serve 2 purposes. They serve to confuse and they serve to alienate the new seekers because nobody understands what these terms are. It's like learning a new language. I've been to, back in the day, I've been to large churches that have buzzwords, and you walk in the door and it's like you've walked into a land of foreign languages because you don't know the buzzwords. Okay, so And actually, one of because nobody has a standardized definition of many of the words we use, the picture you have in your mind might be a little bit different. So I'm going to tell you tonight exactly what happens when the barley, and we're going to, I think, except for Jeremy, and Jeremy, I know you're not a woman, but I think you can follow us. I'm going to use terms that we are, as a woman, are familiar with, okay? Because I want to paint you an absolute word picture that you don't need a photograph of. We all know what a breech birth is. A breech birth is when the extremities of the baby is born or delivered before the head is. Okay? When the barley is being born, and it's literally, it's coming out a narrow opening, just like a child does at the very top of the plant. When the barley is being born, the extremities come out first. So we have these little spikes on the heads of the barleys, okay? But these spikes are much taller than the barley head. So what you see from that birth canal is that the baby is being born breech. And those awns are going to come up out of that place of birth. And when it does that, there's one leaf on the tip of the plant. And because these extremities are very stiff, as they come out of the birth canal, that leaf is going to stand straight up. And it changes the appearance of the entire field. Because until that plant goes into the birthing process, the grass lays. It'll get tall, and the grass gets so tall and it lays over, it curves over. It curves over and it points down. But when that plant goes into the birthing process, those awns make that final blade of grass stand straight up, because out of that birthing area, it has pushed that final leaf up and makes it stand straight up. When the plant is nearing the process of bringing out, let's call it the child, you can see sometimes the little awns or little sticks sticking out, but you can also see a swelling in the plant. The plant looks pregnant. And depending on how tall the plant is, sometimes you have to go all the way down to the earth. If it's a taller plant, you don't have to go all the way down to the earth, but you can see that swelling, and you can literally palpitate that plant and find the head where it is on the way to being born. So this is the process that they call coming out of the boot. And you're right. I think it was who someone said it's a very confusing process to people, to new people. It's a very confusing process. And that's why I want to take away all these magic words, and I want to explain it very detailed to you, so that somebody that you meet and you want to explain about the calendar, or who has questions, you've got the vocabulary to describe this to them. It is literally, and it is so much like a birth that even when babies are born, especially babies of color, they don't have their color at first. When the barley is born, it is so light lemon yellow that it has no color. And it takes it a few days before it starts making chlorophyll, like maybe, I think, depending on the time of day, it shows up. If it's the beginning of the day, probably by the next day, you're going to start to see the chlorophyll. But that barley is literally born white and almost completely devoid of any color, besides maybe a little tinge of lemon yellow. Let me see if I can. Can you guys see that? Is it bigger than a thumbnail? Is it pretty good size? these are all new barley heads. Do you see how white they are? They probably exited the body of the plant the day before I took this picture. They're very, very, very pale, and it takes them a couple of days before they're going to turn green, which brings up another verse, that the fields are white unto harvest. I want to suggest to you that this is what the Messiah was talking about, because white barley is not standing in the field. By the time it turns white, it's shattered. But this is white unto harvest, because what happens next is this head is going to now start producing a grain on the inside. Let's see if I can find another picture for you. Stop sharing this. Now that I've described to you basically that, oh, here's another one of those from that same field. Nope, different one. Hang on, stop sharing. Screen share. This. Oh. Okay. This one. Some of these are in the shade, but it's hard to see. But you can see how pale this grain is right here. And there were in that field exactly 2 barley that were in bloom. All of these barley I was able to open up, and I was literally able to see, I'm not even going to tell you what the word is that the other groups use. I could see the barley forming the flower inside of where the grain would be. So the next thing is this barley is going to have to bloom before it's even going to start making a grain.
So Becca, that is actually before it is even a beeb, right? So with
Yes.
the flat, okay, that makes sense.
Because what is a beeb? It has to make flour, right? It has to grow a plant. Right now, there's nothing inside of these plants. If I go back there today, there's nothing inside of these plants.
When you
So-
say, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead, Nancy.
When you say bloom, you're not talking about blooming into a flower. You're talking about a bloom being full, correct?
No, I'm talking about, let's see if I can pull this up right here. The barley actually creates a little bloom. Is that bigger for you guys as well? Can you-
Yeah, the little white things is what you're
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, yeah.
They actually need to bloom. They need to be pollinated.
Wow.
That's just like any other plant. I mean, if you
Yeah.
like a
Right.
tomato plant, they have to bloom before the fruit starts getting that little impregnation of that little fruit, and it takes a while for it to ripen. And when you can pick your green tomatoes before they're even ripe, and that's what I think of when I look at the Abib barley. It's already there'll be a baby in there, so to speak,
Right.
and it'll be tender.
Yeah, and right now, like I said, most of these that I looked at were so delicate and so flat because they were just born. I mean, you could tell that everything was in place, but kind of like a newborn baby is all wrinkly and not filled out. These are the same way. These heads are not filled out even. They don't even have the correct form to them yet.
What is the time period? Becca, I know like with me, I haven't done this yet. I plan on doing it this season, but I wanted to write down my time period of from when it flowers to when the fruits produce to when the plants actually start to reseed themselves. What is the time period that you've witnessed being in the land?
I'm going to tell you, I don't pay attention to that.
Oh, okay.
I don't pay attention to it. There are too many variables, and anybody who tells you that they know, they're not being honest. They probably think they know, but they're not being honest.
I mean, the weather can affect everything.
Absolutely. And I have seen 1 year, let me try to count backwards, 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago, the barley came out in the north before it did in the south, and the barley was ready in the south. And when a month after our calendar, when the Rabbinite calendar for Pesach rolled around and they began mowing our area here to do the Pesach cleanup, this barley was just at 4 months beginning to reach that understanding of making a first fruits offering, of making a flour and being able to pass through the fire. And it had been 4 months, but we had had a tremendous amount of rain and the barley was very, very, very tall. I'll tell you another thing. Every year until this year, I have depended on the barley that ripens along the road to know in advance when to start looking for the barley in the field. There's no barley in hot areas this year, not yet. And we've got barley in the field. And so I really, and it's really not, I think we stumble when we demand patterns.
Mhm.
It's a good point. We like patterns, but you're absolutely right. Because I tried even last year when I was doing things with my gardening, I expected to see the same patterns, but it absolutely had a lot to do with the weather.
That was lesson I had to learn to get away from the rabbinical calendar that the churches I was in were using, wanting to calculate the years way in advance. They'd have the calendar set up 10 years in advance and realizing if you do that, you're not depending on God to show you.
Mhm.
You know, you want to do it yourself and want to know.
Yeah.
And we can't.
The other
I
thing that
think
got me was that I didn't like the first fruits. If you don't offer those first fruits, then how will it be a blessing? How will it be blessed without that? So how often does that happen? You know, and then the other thing that really always gets me is that question of, okay, if there's first fruits in one man's field, is he going to hang on and wait until the other men have their fields ready to offer up as first fruits? Because it just always seemed like it was that one go up time. And that gets really confusing when you talk to people. It's really hard. You know, like if this guy's field in the north side of the land is ready, but this guy's field in the south side of the land hasn't even, flowered. I mean, how do you explain that? That's a real difficult one for me.
Well, let's look at Exodus 22:19. Thou shalt not delay to offer is added. Thou shalt not delay the first of thy ripe fruits. Now, this is the 7 species. Thy liquors, where does the liquors come from? The liquids come from the grapes, the pomegranates, the olives, and the firstborn of thy sons thou shalt give to me. Now, the question is, were the first of thy first fruits, is he talking about barley or is he talking about the first of the barley? I think he's talking about both. I think he's talking about the very first of the barley, and barley is the very first fruit.
Mhm. So some would not even have barley to come. They would have their lambs. And is that correct or is that not correct?
What we saw last year, so Nancy, we're in a huge learning curve. I'm not going to tell you that and this is exactly why when I go to the field, I pretend like I know nothing and I can't make a mistake if I don't know anything. If I'm just looking
Right.
at what's there and what's in front of my face, if I'm just evaluating what's in front of my face, I'm less likely to make a mistake. So I can talk to you. I can talk to you about last year. Last year's first fruit was ready so early that there would have been in fact, it got the term that it was the first flush because we had that early plants that came out and then the rains continued and then there were some things that come out behind it. That first flush, that first fruit was so early last year that there would have been no issue presenting it and the men all being there for the week of unleavened and still having plenty of time to go back and get what they had in their field because it was so early. The question is, do we have that these days? Do we have that ability? Our land is, and I'm just going to talk to you the way that nobody else is going to talk to you, okay? Our land is constantly changing. Last year's a perfect example. Last year, yes, was miraculous, and we can talk about how miraculous it was. And I love to talk about it because I walked out a miracle last year, beyond a shadow of a doubt. But it's a perfect example of our land changing. In 2020, that was a sown field of domestic barley. I had never paid attention to it because I could see the rows. I knew it was sown. In 2021, it was not a sown field. There was wild barley and domestic barley both volunteering there. Guess what? This year, that field doesn't exist.
Mhm.
Our land is constantly changing.
You know, Becca, I really think that is, I think that's a part of his plan, because you hit the nail on the head with a lot of the inspectors that have gone out before with looking at patterns. You can see that they're looking for those things, and they are able to predict, and it becomes all about them.
Mhm.
Where if it's almost like Abba is saying, hey, these are mine, and he says that in scripture, these are my feasts, these are mine. And that way there's no what is the word I'm looking for? There's no way that individuals can make it about them. I mean, they still can, and they obviously are, but the fact that he's closed borders and not allowed people in, and no tourism, has been, in my opinion, about him. It's very prophetic, him say, no, these are mine. This is mine. I just want to reiterate that fact. I mean, I can see that what he's doing, and that he's still showing everyone, this is mine. I'm in control. I'm in
Right.
control of the weather. Man's not in control of the barley when it happens, or the weather, or anything else. It's all him.
It's all him. And so let's go back to the idea that he's providing food for his beloved. Okay, so eventually we're going to join those numbers of those who have gone on before us. I'm not going to try to, people have different understandings, but eventually we're all going to be together, right? And if we're part of those numbers, then when we look back at Pesach, it's an anniversary, it's an anniversary of when he brought people out of Egypt and he established that covenant. I think we've all been married here probably. And if not, we hope to be. Now, if I had an anniversary with my husband and I told him, honey, I know it's our anniversary, and I know it's not the right day, but my friends and I, we're going to go over here. We're going to have an anniversary party all by our lonelies over here. And I know you understand, and we're doing the best I can, but we really want you to be happy with our efforts because we want to be together and we want to have unity between us. If it's a covenant marriage and a covenant relationship, who is it we need to be pleasing? And if we are the people of the final ingathering, the 7th month, all of those prophetic things that we don't really see a fulfillment of in the scripture, shouldn't we know for sure that our wedding date's around the corner? Uh-oh, hang on, my battery's getting low. What's wrong? That'll take care of it.
I kind of thought of something, the analogy, it may not work, but it just occurred to me, like when a man or a group creates a calendar, it's like a grid, okay?
Uh-huh.
And we say, okay, this event has to happen in this box, and this feast has to happen in this box. But if you think about it, it's going off grid, and you just do it, and Father provides what has to be there for that event to happen. Then nobody owns it.
That's right.
That's you're just off grid.
Absolutely, because what does he say? He said, basically, he said to the people, this is my land. You can only sojourn with me here.
Beck, and it makes sense too, because I mean, for those of us, even in our own flesh, that I mean, he was so perfect. He even thought about that aspect. I mean, Paul and I got married in July. We're not going to celebrate our anniversary in November. We're going to
That's
celebrate it in July. And so even us in our own little infinite understanding, we should be able to get that timing is important. It's just like almost with the the Christmas argument that a lot of people, when they first come into Torah, I've heard people say, we're not going to celebrate Yeshua's birthday. You're going to celebrate it on his birthday, not another day. So I would think that the calendar people would also understand that aspect too, that it's very important that that timing is, because it's his timing.
Mhm,
And if he's saying this is when our anniversary is, come celebrate it with me. And
mhm,
we say, no, we're going to celebrate it next month or the month after, then we're being disobedient.
mhm,
And that's how I look at it.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. But yes, but let's take it back to where we started. What we're doing is we're recognizing that he's our husband and he's kept his part of the covenant to provide the food. I know that's a hard concept for us because most of us, work and go to the grocery store and grab the food there. And it kind of has been a huge disconnect, especially to our generation, where you can drive through McDonald's or Taco Bell or, food's everywhere. Food's easy, food's fast and cheap. And how has been, I don't know how it is there now, but it's, we're disconnected from the idea that this is our covenant provision from him, and that what he was asking is for us to recognize. What is it? I know that Julie would be able to tell me really quick about a wandering Armenian almost ready to starve when we present the first fruits. That whole thing that we were without covenant and we were almost ready to starve. And then we entered the bonds of covenant of having our creator being our father and our husband.
Yeah,
And
that's Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 19.
go ahead and read that.
It says, and it shall be when you come into the land which Yahuwah, your Elohim, is given as an inheritance, and you possess it and dwell in it, that you shall take some of the first of all the fruits of the soil, which you bring from the land that Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you, and you shall put it in a basket, and go to the place where Yahuwah your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell there, and you shall come to the one who is priest in those days, and you shall say to him, I shall declare today to Yahuwah your Elohim that I have come to the land which Yahuwah swore to our fathers to give us. And the priest shall take the basket from your hand and place it before the slaughter place of Yahuwah your Elohim. And you shall answer and say before Yahuwah your Elohim, my father was a perishing Armenian, and he went down to Mitzrayim and sojourned there with a few men. And there he became a nation, great and mighty and numerous. But the Mitzrites did evil to us and afflicted us and imposed hard labor on us. Then we cried out to Yahuwah Elohim of our fathers, and Yahuwah heard our voice and saw our affliction and our toil and our oppression. And Yahuwah brought us out of Mitzrayim with a strong hand, with an outstretched arm, and with great fear, and with signs and wonders. And he brought us to this place and has given us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now, see, I have brought the first fruits of the land which you, O Yahuwah, have given me. Then you shall place it before Yahuwah your Elohim, and bow down before Yahuwah your Elohim, and shall rejoice in all the good which Yahuwah your Elohim has given to you and your house, you and the Levite and the stranger who is among you. And when you have completed tithing, all the tithe of your increase in the third year, which is the year of tithing, and have given to the Levite, to the stranger, and to the fatherless, and to the widow, and have eaten within your gates, and have been satisfied, then you shall say before Yahuwah your Elohim, I have put away the set apart portion from my house, and also have given to the Levite, and to the stranger, and to the fatherless, and to the widow, according to all of your command which you have commanded me. And I have not transgressed your commands, nor have I forgotten. I have not eaten any of it when in mourning, nor have I removed any of it for any unclean use, nor given any of it for the dead. I have obeyed your voice I've obeyed the voice of Yahuwah, my Elohim, and I have done according to all that you have commanded me. And then it goes on and talks about how then he'll bless us.
Right.
Do you want me to keep reading?
No, that's okay. That's enough right there. So we were to give him the first and the best because of the covenant and because he saved us from perishing. What is it? Jeremiah said, hang on, let's go there real quick. Get my e-sword back up. I shouldn't have I've got rid of it, but I can't see your faces if it's up on the screen. Whoops.
And it also sounds to me like the blessing isn't even, I mean, it's the abundance of the harvest, but the blessings also. So, his laws are written on our hearts. That's a blessing in itself that we understand and have that deep desire to keep his law. And I think that may be why we see the actual division that we have, and even sometimes the hostility is because it's two spirits working against each other physically and emotionally.
That's right. That's right. So here he says in Ezekiel 16, let's start in verse 3. Thus say, thus saith the Lord unto Jerusalem, thy birth and thy nativity is in the land of Canaan. Thy father was an Amorite, thy mother an Hittite. As for thy nativity, in the day which thou was born, thy navel was not cut, neither wast thou washed in water to supple thee. Thou wast not salted at all, nor swaddled at all. None I pitied thee to do any of these unto thee, to have compassion upon thee. But thou wast cast out in the open field to the loathing of thy person in the day thou wast born. And when I passed by thee and saw thee polluted in thy own blood, I said unto thee, when thou wast in thy blood, live. Yea, I said unto thee, when thou wast in thy blood, live. I have caused thee to multiply as the bud of the field. It's that time of year that we're looking at right now. And thou hast increased and waxen great, and thou art come into excellent ornaments. Thy breasts are fashioned, thy hair is grown, whereas thou wast naked and bare. And when I passed over thee and looked upon thee, behold, thy time was the time of love. And I spread my skirt over thee, that act of covenant, and covered thy nakedness. Yea, I swear unto thee, and entered into a covenant with thee, saith the Lord, and thou becomest mine. So there's no aspect of what he has given us to understand that doesn't call him not only our father, but our husband. And there's nothing that he demonstrates to us. Even in the New Testament, what is it Yeshua said? Give us this day our daily bread. Okay, so these first fruits offerings, yes, they were a time when we met with him. There were times when we went up to Jerusalem. There were times when we gathered together. But above and beyond that, it was his provision for his beloved. So if we're not looking at the calendar and we're not seeing food as a covenant provision, when we're looking at the feast we're keeping, if we don't know for sure there's food inside that plant, then we've got the wrong calendar. And having green ears, green awns, green sticks does not mean that there's anything inside the grain holders in that plant. And if we wait too long, then we're going to end up losing what was in the field. And yes, the prophetic significance that Yeshua was the first fruits from the dead. The field is the world. We don't need a world that's ready to harvest. We need a first fruit from the world. We need that representation of Yeshua. So we know a lot about the prophetic calendar, but it has to be married to what he promised the people, the significance that he promised the people. And that was clothing, food, and offspring.
Hey, Becca. And in that scripture too, in verse 8, when it talks about spreading my skirt over thee, and I think we've talked about that before, during that time of love and life, which is at the beginning of when everything's come into life, we know that that's about like Ruth and Boaz going down to the feet. But what I'm thinking about is ovulation. I don't know if it's appropriate to say, but when a woman is trying to get pregnant, a man and a wife, you see that the ovulation period is very important.
Mhm.
That's the time when those seeds are getting ready to come out, and they can marry together with that. But a woman cannot get pregnant without the husband.
Mhm.
So unless that seed is in there, she cannot get pregnant. And when I think about the barley and the impregnation of that barley coming out, I think about that being pregnant when we're born again, and there's that rebirth of that coming out. And so to me, it's not only I mean, it's covenant language, absolutely, that can only be seen between a man and a wife. But it's this verse is just, I mean, completely proves that it's that time of love and life. I mean, we see that. You've given us that witness over and over, even with the timing of the lambs and when the barley's coming out. But it is significant to the actual number one offspring of the Father putting that skirt over us, and us being him, us covering our nakedness,
Mhm.
being intimate with him in that way, that we can only get pregnant that way. So I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I can see it clearly.
Yeah, no,
It's
no,
very
you're
beautiful.
right. That passage, he took her from her nativity to her time of matrimony, beyond a shadow of a doubt. That's what that passage represents. Yeah. And so this year's field, where I did see the barley on the day of the new moon that I showed you the photos of, um, again, it was miraculous. I wasn't out looking for barley. My inspections were over. The field from last year still had just a smidgen. The length of the field was divided, and the early part was destroyed, and the later upper part is still intact. But in that later upper part, there was still just a little section outside of that newly fenced off area that had barley out of the boot before I even went for inspections. And I didn't mention it because for me, it was like, it's a moot point. The field's not there. So what? There's maybe a cluster of barley I can wrap my arms around that's out of the boot over there. So what? It doesn't serve a purpose. I mean, you can't declare anything from that. And so I had seen it out of the boot, and it was so. In fact, I told April, I said, I'm driving down the road on Marco Polo. I said, April, I said, you're not going to believe. I said, that crazy field's got barley out there again. But I said, it's not enough to do anything with. So I'm driving down the road talking to her on Marco Polo. But like I said, half of the field is gone. There's really nothing there to speak of. Even though I see barley, it's really nothing to speak of. And I didn't see any barley in all of the rest of the Israel during the inspections. A lot of it was in the process of being born, as we talked about earlier, that breech birth and the appearance of a birth. Then on, what day was it? Last week, one day, I think it was on Thursday. It was on Thursday. I was so tired. And I've been talking about going to Gilgal, the sandal footprint, where the Israelites crossed the Jordan, that first encampment where they set up the tabernacle. I'd been talking about going to Gilgal. And so we had tried to go a couple of times, and the rain had stopped us, had to do the inspections. And Wednesday night, my friend called me and she said, hey, did you look at the weather? We need to go tomorrow. And I was just so tired. And I just was like, I didn't want to go. But we went, and maybe I'll talk about that next week. Yah willing, had some wonderful epiphanies there at the Gilgal. We went to Damia border crossing with Jordan, which is, you read in Joshua how they came from the city of Adam, and they crossed the Jordan River, and then they set up the first encampment at Gilgal. So we went to the Damia crossing, and we went to the Gilgal, and we were coming back home, and we had actually looked at the field on the way down to the border crossing. But my focus was that the arugula was blooming. I'm looking at the wild arugula. I'm showing and because we'd be, I've been foraging and I taught the ladies, we foraged right there at the border crossing on the Israel side at the Damia Bridge into Jordan. So me and three other ladies were cutting arugula and cutting things there, wild Swiss chard, milk thistle to take home with us. And so we were looking there as we went on the way down at the arugula. And I'm saying, no, look, this is the arugula here. It's going to be okay. We're going to find a lot of it. Look, it's blooming. And I'm looking at that aspect of it. So on the way home, we happened to stop right across the street from this location at a gas station. And was I getting gas? Actually, I was getting gas. And I sit and I'm filling the tank up, and I'm, you're filling the tank up and you're gawking around because you have nothing better to do. And I'm thinking, well, that looks like barley over there. I think that's barley over there. And so again, it was like God saying, hey, I'm over here. That barley in the field being out of the boot right at the new moon sighting, which is basically, and I'm not going to, we talked about patterns. I'm not setting a pattern, but that is basically what happened last year. Is right at the beginning of that last month before we started, into the 12th month or into the final month. For us, it's the 13th month this year. I saw barley starting to show up. So for me, this is a signal that it does need that extra month because it's just coming right now. It's just at that point of maturity, and it's going to need 6 weeks before we're going to have anything that looks like food to give back a first fruits to the Father to. So really, I know we haven't really been on the call too long. So if you have any questions, I'm open to any questions, but this is what I wanted to share with you. Nancy, I see your hand up. This is what I wanted to share with you, is that we have to come out of the language of the calendar, and we have to come to terms with the very first thing he gave it for, and that's for a provision for his bride. Yes, it's for the feasts. Yes, it's for his calendar. Yes, it's prophetic. But in its inception, it was their covenant provision as his spouse, as the woman who come out of Egypt. And then later as the 2 daughters who come across the Jordan. Go ahead, Nance.
Well, this isn't necessarily calendar related a little bit, but it's sort of, when I was doing some investigations. Anyway, when they divided up in Joshua, they divided the cities up among the tribes. And I had to ask when you were there if you had ever, or of, where the stones are that the tribes had to set up, or that they all took a stone from the river. Do you know where that location is? Is it something
No. I was I didn't see anything at the Damia crossing that looked like that, but you can't, it would have been at the river, I'm sure, from the words. I remember what you're talking about. And the border crossing on the Israel side. Okay. So the Jordan River is the border, but they always have this easement away from the edge of the river that you really can't approach Jordan close enough to see the water.
Oh.
So I can't even see in that area, I can't even see the Jordan at the Damia crossing.
Wow. It's neat that you got to go there and share that with us, though. That was just profound what you shared with us. And I'm looking forward to next week to hear more about it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Becca, I was thinking as you were talking about the food, and when they were getting ready, he told them to go spy out the land, and there were grapes and figs and pomegranates, and everything was there. I never even thought about that. It was like the husband was saying, here's the home I've prepared for you. Now go take it, go live there. and everything was going to be provided, a land flowing with milk and honey, but
Yeah.
the bride rejected that. I mean, except for the two, but I never even thought about that in a marital covenant sort of way, but it makes sense because I don't work. I'm retired. My husband works. He provides for me. He makes sure I'm fed. I have clothing. I have a roof over my head. And our offspring are obviously spiritual offspring because we're not at that. We're like Abraham and Sarah. We're old.
Right.
But it's just really beautiful. I appreciate that because I never saw the feast in that way, like a marital covenant.
And it really, if we understand that purpose, it so changes what we expect from the first fruits offering. And it narrows down, well, I should say it excludes many things that the Aviv is not. Anybody else have any questions?
I just wanted to say, when I think about that, it just really makes it, the counterfeits. It talks about, I think in like Deuteronomy, no, it's Exodus 24, I believe. Kind of juxtaposes, like it talks about the feast, and then right away it talks about, like, don't make a covenant with the other, or worship me the way that they worship their gods, lest it be a snare to you. And when you think about that, it just really, those things are fertility rites, like to the other gods. And it just really kind of shows you why celebrating counterfeit feasts of any kind, it's such a, it's just such a slap in the face. And then also when you think about the fact that they're fertility rites, because in a lot of places where it talks about the first fruits of the land, it also says, and the first fruits of your children, and I don't know, I just think about like passage, I think it's in Luke, where where Yeshua is being brought, and basically, he's coming there to be circumcised. Like he is a picture, like that is the first fruits being dedicated,
Yes. Yes.
I don't know. It's just really, all of it just kind of comes together in a new way when you think about it being the duty of marriage.
That's right.
That a man is, supposed to give. And then it also just comes to my mind, just kind of like, as I'm thinking here, where Jacob promises to give a tenth of all he has, and I really think that he's talking about his children too in that passage. So it just kind of all, like it's all throughout, there's more than one place where this is.
Yeah. And this was actually, I may have mentioned this before, I read the rabbinical writings a lot to kind of try to glean where things changed. I love the Ta'anit because I learn how they did so many things agriculturally. But one of the things that I read at one point, and if you just think about how far Judaism fell, is this Exodus 21 with what the woman was to be provided by the husband. I mean, it got so bad that the rabbis had to tell the men how much money they were going to give her for her clothing and her food. So even in the first century, they still understood the principle of the provision of the wife, even though maybe they pretty much had lost their understanding of that they were supposed to be married to Elohim, and they had lost that connection with his provision to them, and changed the calendar on many levels in the first century.
You know what, Becca, too, I think about, how backwards at least here in the States, the tradition of marriage, where the woman the bride pays for the wedding, but the man would have to pay the father that price. And I don't know if my calculations are correct, but I believe we studied with a group of folks here a while back, and I think the gentleman who'd studied said at the price of the dowry to pay the father for the bride was equivalent to about $46,000 today, and it may be more than excuse me, maybe more than that. But even that in itself, that is even a provision that the husband is given, even the family of the bride. And if you look at it in that, he's providing that in that covenant, he's still providing your family everything that is needed. And it does, like Julie said, it makes a big difference. And you bringing this to light, it totally changes how you look at everything. Because even thinking about, and I don't know if this is accurate, I know a lot of people are coming into the feast. He brought a lot of us in by way of the feast. My thought process is different now than it was 12 years ago. But thinking about that, people that are stuck in that and they don't want to change, they don't want to grow. But even the ones that are not celebrating the right timing, that would, I mean, this is for conversation. Does that mean that it's no different than if they're looking at the way, like Julie just read that scripture, don't go the ways, don't follow after their guys, don't celebrate the same things. And I'm paraphrasing, but wouldn't that be the same concept for those that are not celebrating the calendar the way that biblically speaking? I mean, if the rabbis had changed the calendar, what is the difference?
I had a conversation with a relatively well-known guy that has I think, I really don't know. I mean, I anyway, I don't, I think he's got a pretty big congregation. I mean, like a building. And it goes back to that thing that we were talking about, that I was basically told by him, my people don't want me to tell them that I have to wait to hear about the barley in Israel. They want to know ahead of time. I mean, he literally told me that. He says, I can barely get him to keep the Sabbath. How am I going to get them to wait for Israel to tell us when the barley's ready?
I gotta say, like, to me, it reminds me of that verse, like it's in the New Testament where it talks about, like, it really equates like planning for the future as evil. Like, I think, is it James that says, like, it's like, woe to you who say, we'll go here and do this or that. But instead you say, yeah, willing, Yahuwah willing, we'll do it. And I really learned that lesson a couple of years ago when I planned a trip, checking, and I checked, the rabbinical calendar to see if that was going to be, because I didn't know, I didn't know any better yet. I had just started keeping Sabbath and it wasn't. And then throughout the course of the time, I came into the understanding that, like, oh no, that's not what we're supposed to follow. And then I had this trip hanging over my head and my husband wanting to take it and, like praying to get out of it and whatever. But it was just like, oh my gosh, like I understood that scripture so well, just that. And it's funny because it's such a tendency, like every single person that I tell or talk to about the feast, like they're initially excited, or what if they're initially excited, it's like, tell me when it is. I want to write it on my calendar.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And
can I even tell you can't even tell you how many dozens of inquiries I get. When Passover's going to be this year? What's it looking like? Can you give me a hint? I need to get up, and I know that our world is like, we have vacation schedules and we have to, and I get that, but it's like, we have to walk between, we're in the world, but not of the world. At some point, we have to walk in that faith place.
And I think that that's like exactly what you just said, because it's like, if truly we're like, you know what, when it happens, I'm going to do it. And Yahuwah is my provider. It doesn't matter if I lose my job.
Yeah.
Yahuwah is my provider. He is my Elohim. There is no other. Then it won't matter, but that's not, an easy place to walk. Like, that's truly walking by faith.
It is.
Think about the first Exodus when he told him, you have your feet, your shoes ready to go, your staff in hand, and be ready to go, because for the Passover. And I think about that, it was like, it was like a suddenly, here you go, this is going to happen, be prepared, get ready to get out, head on out. Yet we want to know in advance, but it's
A
like
month ahead of time.
this, that's right. And this, and it is, that's not what he's given us. He said, hey, just be ready with your staff in hand and eat it in haste.
That's
And
right.
so I think about that too, like even with this timing, he will decide, and he gives us that timing according to what he designed it to be. We just got to be ready to go, ready to put that blood over the doorpost and, have ourselves inside and all of the above. But I think we talked about that the other day, Becca, and being prepared or knowing a month in advance is not, it's, I don't know, it's cheating, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Well,
It's not trusting.
well, yeah, not only that, but I can tell you a lot of weather can happen in 30 days. A lot of weather can happen in 30 days. The day that I was out for the Gilgal and saw that field, we had 2 days of near 70 degree weather. So that's what the barley did. After I'd looked everywhere, that's what the barley did. So 30 days can speed things up or it can slow things down. And it's really, really, really not good to try to predict that far out, because we're not in control of not only the barley, but the weather. Nancy, you've got your hand up.
One of the things that I encounter when I speak to people in regarding to the timing is they're still also in the mind state that matzah is those crackers you buy at the grocery store that you have to make sure that you have all of your yeast and white breads and all of that stuff out of the house. That includes a lot of pastas and things like that. So that can require a lot of work and planning. And so I think there's a panic even among the people, because even how they grocery store and all of those things, that is not there now for me. I'm so much more relaxed now that the truth has been revealed than I used to be, because I remember planning 3 months before when it could happen, how much work and planning went into my meals and what I purchased and things like that. And because sometimes you can't get rid of certain things by that time, and I don't want to be wasteful.
Right.
So it's changed because of what you learned and what you've taught us about the matzah. And I mean, it's really a huge difference.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is. And so but a lot of that, a lot of that's just tradition that's become law. And that's why I'm just really super, super careful about any traditions that are kept, because while I may know it's a tradition, if I'm keeping a tradition and I have young children, which I did, for them, it becomes law. Well, my mom always did, mom did this. It's real important. And I think
my brother, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
My brother used
that's
to.
what happened to the Jewish nation. I think that the traditions became law.
Becca, there's a scripture that actually says that. I'll find it for you. It's in Chronicles. It's like a promise. It was to Abraham. And then it talks about it became a law unto, and then it was something for Isaac, and then it became a law unto Jacob. And I'll find it for you, because it is exactly what you just said. It's so true.
Well, my brother used to say all the time that majority of generational curses were learned behaviors from our parents. And I really, truly believe that. I think that almost every generational curse that goes forward each day comes from, and I have a son that he has a good moral compass, and he's a really good kid. And yesterday he made plans to go to the mall with his friend, and he wanted to go at noon. And I, me standing my ground, because typically when he asks for anything at all, I always accommodate him, because he's been such a wonderful son compared to what I've been through with my other children. But he had a better example than my other children had. So it literally had me torn up. But I was like, I have to make this final decision. I have to serve my father first. And that was something that my son used to say he got angry about. He's like, why do you let him come before your own family? So he struggled with that. But then everything turned out fine. I made a certain time that we could go. We did that. So it's like at first I was torn to pieces, and then everything was fine afterwards.
Mhm.
So it was just such a blessing. At the same time, it was a panic.
Mhm.
And I see that with you, Becca, even with this whole thing with Matthew. I think there's going to be a blessing in it.
Mhm.
I feel very firmly that there's going to be a blessing in it,
Yeah.
even though it's a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. Any other questions, ladies, gentlemen? Mystery guest on the iPhone, anybody? Okay, well, I know that was kind of brief, but I hope that this will help you minister to some people who are seeking, maybe some people who are questioning things they've believed, maybe even open a door for someone who just needs to hear that while we have a calendar that is tied to the law and ritual and all of these things we know, and it's prophetic. In the beginning, it was given as a marriage covenant and provision for the bride, provision of food, shelter, and offspring. And if there's no food in that first fruits basket, we have got the wrong calendar. Wrong calendar. It's really important that there's food and plenty of food for that first fruits offering. Okay.
Thank you, Becca.
You're welcome. Someone dismiss us in prayer and we will call it a night.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's really simple. I mean, it's just a simple concept, but we've stepped over it for a long time because we've been focusing on other trees in the forest, right?
No, and I'm
Amen.
glad that you brought it up with such clarity because it's something that I really understood and could articulate in light of seeing the false feasts as a marriage covenant, but now seeing how, like, what they're really trying to counterfeit. Because if you think about those other gods, like, you know, a lot of them are fertility, but then they're also, it's like the god of fortune and,
That's right.
you know, you're having a good year and, you know, these things, these rituals that they do. And, you know, seeing where they're counterfeiting so clearly, I don't know. I mean, there's just another aspect of it that really, I don't know, for me, that was part of the epiphany that I just had. So I'm appreciative of it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, that this calendar, the biblical calendar, everything points to Yeshua, and you know, some of the other calendars, even looking back whenever we used to follow the rabbinic calendar, it's like they don't believe that Yeshua is Moshiach. So how can that correlate when everything is all about that marriage? So anyhow, I just thought of that too. That was pretty profound,
Yeah.
Becca. Very profound.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, guys, I guess I'll just close in prayer. I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody who is supporting this ministry. And if you feel led to support this ministry, there is information in the description box below. So until next time, when I bring you more information about the barley across Israel that's in the throes of bringing forth those seed heads called coming out of the boot, this is Rivka from the Galilee. Shalom and Lehitraot.